My name is Leah, and I'm 33 years old. A civil servant who works in a national administrative agency. Life's been a grind with a hectic schedule, but I'm doing what I've always wanted to do since my student days, so I'm pretty fulfilled. In my personal life, I've been living with my partner Huey for 5 years. We're not officially married, just a common law couple. Huey's parents often say, "It's fine now, but shouldn't you consider getting married for the future?" But we haven't taken that step yet. You see, my family is steeped in male chauvinism. They prioritize the eldest son above all. My parents, and even my grandparents on both sides, have always treated me like I'm worthless, just because I'm the eldest daughter. Despite being the first child for my parents, and the first grandchild on my dad's side, no one ever showed interest in me.
I have a talent show at school tomorrow. Can you come?
I've asked my mom and dad countless times, only to be mocked and told,
"If we had time, we'd rather sleep."
They would say, "You're really stupid if you don't understand that." And they just make fun of me. I remember feeling heartbroken seeing my friends' parents taking photos and videos during school events. Then, just before I started elementary school, my brother Miles was born. The joy from my parents and grandparents was overwhelming. Even my workaholic dad would rush home if mom texted. "Miles seems a bit feverish, maybe he's got a cold." They'd both stay up all night taking care of him. So, when I started elementary school, neither of my parents even attended the orientation. They'd tell the school, "We're too busy with our son to care about our daughter." I was alone on my first day of school, watching other families take commemorative photos. Not just my parents, but my grandparents too, acted like Miles was the only grandchild that mattered. In particular, Miles' paternal grandparents who lived with him bought him everything he wanted and were happy to take him anywhere he wanted to go. Because of this upbringing, Miles grew up to be a selfish, arrogant person who looked down on everyone else, especially me. He'd often take my food or destroy my belongings for fun, and no one in the family would bat an eye. Once, he tore up a book I'd borrowed from a friend. When I scolded him, my family said, "It's just a book, you can replace it."
"That's exactly right. That's why girls are so troublesome."
"That's right, it's best for boys to be energetic." "Miles is growing up wonderfully," they'd add, praising him without a hint of criticism. Miles would just smirk, showing no signs of remorse. This cycle had been ongoing since Miles was born. I grew up without feeling any warmth or love from anyone in my family. I had just one wish: to attend college as far away from home as possible, essentially cutting ties with my family. At home, my brother Miles was always in the way, or I'd get tasked with chores that interrupted my studies. So I hit the books and libraries and empty classrooms after school. To cover college application fees and travel expenses for school tours and exams, I worked part-time at grocery stores. All that effort paid off. I got into a prestigious university. My parents and grandparents couldn't care less.
"If you want to go, go, but don't expect any help from us,"
they said. I saw that coming a mile away. I had already applied for every scholarship I could and planned to live in a dorm to minimize costs. Plus, I had my best friend Selena. We'd been friends since elementary school, and she and her parents knew all about my family situation. Selena's dad worked at the same company as mine, albeit in a different department. My dad's chauvinistic behavior was often a topic of discussion at his workplace. My mom and Selena's mom even went to the same school, and she told me my mom had similar domineering personalities like my dad. When Selena and I first became friends, her parents were worried. "Friends with the daughter of that couple?" But they warmed up to me after seeing how much Selena praised me and how I stood by her when she was being isolated by other girls in class. "If it weren't for you, Leah, my school life would have been miserable. Thank you," Selena would say. But the truth is, I don't know what I would have done without her and her parents. They were the ones who kept me going. I was able to survive because of Selena, who laughed and said, "Leah, you be you." And Selena's parents, who always offered a helping hand. Without them, I might have lost my way or given up on life altogether. As for college, Selena had already decided to attend a local university.
I've got nothing to do until graduation, so let me help you, Leah,
she said. She helped me with the nitty-gritty details of placement exam logistics, like booking hotels and flights. On the day I left for college, my family didn't bother to see me off, but Selena and her parents came to the airport. As we said our goodbyes, she handed me an envelope.
This is a farewell gift from all of us.
You'll need stuff for dorm life, right? Inside was $2,000. I tried to refuse, but she insisted.
Take it. We'll always be friends, but I won't be able to help you like before,
she said, tears in her eyes. I never touched that money during my college years. Holding onto that envelope reminded me of Selena and her family, giving me the strength to keep going. After graduating from college, I went on to graduate school, which was my dream. I passed the civil service exam and took my first steps into the working world. Selena and I kept in touch through texts, and she even visited me during family vacations. Selena ended up working as an administrative staff member at a local hospital after graduating from college. After 8 years, I returned to my hometown for the first time in 12 years. I was invited to her wedding, where she and a doctor who worked at the same hospital as her was getting married. During those 12 years, my maternal grandparents had passed away. But my paternal grandparents, who lived with us, was still healthy. My brother Miles had enrolled in a prestigious middle school, considered the most challenging in our area, the same year I went to college. My parents were proud, saying things like,
"Miles is just like me, so talented. We're excited for his future."
Absolutely, we might even have to send him abroad for studies. But Miles, who was considered a child prodigy in elementary school, found himself among equally capable students in his new school. He was shocked when he scored average on his first exam.
"This can't be the real me. I'm better than this."
Instead of putting in the effort, he blamed everyone else, teachers, classmates, the school, even timing, for his shortcomings. By the time he reached 9th grade, the school suggested he consider transferring, saying it would be less stressful for him. But both Miles and my parents couldn't accept the reality due to their pride, and Miles continued on to high school. As feared, he couldn't keep up and eventually dropped out. At that time, I was in grad school. My parents suddenly asked,
"Aren't there any schools there that Miles could get into? The more prestigious, the better."
Of course, a school with tradition would be ideal for Miles. Don't you know any influential professors? I told them that was unrealistic. They accused me of being cold and heartless, but I maintained that what's impossible is impossible, and eventually, we lost contact. According to Selena, who had stayed in our hometown, my parents eventually enrolled Miles in an online high school. They made excuses like, "Our son is too exceptional for regular education. He would only attract jealousy and make life difficult for himself." Miles graduated from the online high school, went to a local college, and got a job at a subsidiary of my dad's company through my grandfather's influence. I met Miles again when I attended Selena's wedding. I had returned to my hometown 2 days before the wedding, at Selena's request.
I have something I want to talk about,
she had said. I wasn't keen on visiting my parents, so I stayed at the hotel where the wedding was to take place. I spent some relaxing time with Selena, going to the spa and such. We were invited to dinner by Selena's parents, and it was at the hotel restaurant that I ran into Miles and my parents. They didn't recognize me at first. I guess that's understandable. When I lived at home, I was skinny and didn't have the luxury of caring about my appearance like other girls. It was only when my parents greeted Selena's parents that they realized I was their daughter.
"Leah, is that you? You're back in town?"
My, you've changed. Are you free later? Maybe we could." They were oddly friendly, but I wasn't in the mood. "I'm heading back right after Selena's reception, so I don't have time," I said, and quickly left. I did make eye contact with Miles, but to be honest, I wouldn't have recognized him on the street. He had lost his youthful look, and now had a face that oozed cunning. After the wedding, I returned to my condo. Soon after, I started receiving messages from my parents and Miles, who had forcibly obtained my number from Selena's parents. According to a message from Selena's father, who apologized for giving them my contact, it seemed they wanted me to attend Miles's wedding. Miles is getting married?
Yes, apparently to the younger sister of a college classmate. She's only 21 and quite beautiful.
What does that have to do with me attending? According to Selena's father, Miles had gotten his job through my grandfather's connections, but his self-esteem far exceeded his actual abilities. He also had a bad habit of looking down on people and would say things like,
"No need to listen to people who've stayed in this backwater town,"
making him unpopular.
That's why when he announced his wedding, almost everyone from colleagues to bosses gave excuses like, "I plan to have a terrible cold that day," or "My tarot card reading advised against going in the direction of the venue." Planning to have a cold, huh? I see.
My parents and Miles didn't want to be outdone by the number of attendees from the bride's side. Even though I'm not the most exciting sister or daughter, they seemed to think it was better to have me there, given that I have a graduate degree from a prestigious university and a government job. I was annoyed by their shallow thinking. Competing over the number of attendees is ridiculous, but if I kept ignoring them, they'd surely pester Selena's father, saying,
"Tell our daughter to get in touch."
So I reluctantly replied to Miles's message. He said,
"Long time no talk. You must be happy to be useful to the family for once."
I ignored his petty comment and decided to attend the wedding just to minimize the hassle. Fast forward to the wedding day 2 months later. The bride was as beautiful as Selena's father had described, and she seemed genuinely kind and straightforward. I wondered why such a wonderful woman would marry someone like Miles, but I decided not to pry and just play my role as the groom's sister. After the wedding, Miles and his new wife left for their honeymoon. No one tried to keep me around, and I had nothing to say to my parents or grandparents, so I briefly visited Selena's home, said my greetings, and left. Time passed without any contact until Miles suddenly reached out, inviting me to come see the cherry blossoms. It wasn't a grand event like the National Cherry Blossom Festival in Washington, D.C., but my hometown also had a botanical garden with cherry trees. It's a common seasonal event. However, I was suspicious. It turned out the real agenda wasn't cherry blossoms, but convincing me to give up my inheritance rights. Apparently, there's a big land development plan near our family home. A major developer was planning to buy up the area to build a large condo complex. Real estate transactions were heating up around our family home. Our home was situated right in the planned development area. Our great-grandfather used to run a firewood and charcoal business there, so the property was quite large. It included not just the house, but also a sizable parking area. It seemed Miles and my parents, enticed by the rising land value, wanted to ensure I didn't get a share of the inheritance in the future. Don't count your chickens before they hatch, they say. I never really cared about inheritance, but Huey once advised me,
"Even if you don't need it, it might be good to settle things once and for all."
So I decided to go back home. I booked the same hotel I stayed in before, and I planned to meet my family at the botanical garden. Then came the day. I arrived at the designated spot and found my sister-in-law, whom I'd met only once at a wedding, sitting alone on a bench. I was 3 hours early, but she was there even before me. She seemed well prepared, but her face was pale, and dark circles were evident under her eyes.
Do you remember me? I'm Leah, Miles' sister. We met at the wedding."
Upon hearing this, she stood up in surprise, but almost immediately stumbled. I quickly reached out to catch her. She was surprisingly light and frail. It was like looking at myself back in high school.
"I'm sorry, thank you,"
she said. Her name was Carolyn, if I remembered correctly. Carolyn, right? If you're not feeling well, don't push yourself. Let's sit down. We sat back down, but the bench was cold, probably from the rain earlier. Upon closer inspection, Carolyn's apron and hair were damp, as if she'd been caught in the rain. What time did you get here? We agreed to meet at noon, right?
"Yes, but I was told to secure the best spot for cherry blossom viewing, so I've been sitting here all night to make sure no one else took it."
This might be the best spot for cherry blossoms, but you didn't have to go through all this trouble.
"But if I don't do as Miles says, not just him, but Trevor and Jasmine will scold me too. This is just how it always is."
Trevor and Jasmine are the names of my dad and mom. Hearing Carolyn's story, I felt a rage that made my whole body tremble. I immediately took off my coat and put it on Carolyn. Then, sent a message to Selena. That afternoon, while Selena and I were taking a break, she got an internal call.
I think it's probably from Leah's family. How should I respond?
I wrote down what I wanted Selena to tell my parents and Miles and handed it to her. Sure enough, within an hour, Miles and my parents rushed in.
Hey, what do you mean there's no reason to see you anymore? Exactly, we had to search all over the garden because you broke the appointment and didn't even contact us.
And finally, someone told us they saw you and Selena together.
And that person said you were with my wife too.
The three of them started yelling, but Selena sternly told them to keep their voices down as we were in a hospital. But their silence lasted only a moment. The next second, they turned to Selena.
Who are you? Don't butt in. If you're not family, leave.
They barked. However, Selena, who deals with various patients and their families daily as a senior administrator in the hospital, wasn't fazed. I'm not an outsider. I helped bring your wife from the botanical garden to this hospital. Right now, Carolyn's receiving treatment and resting in her room, so you can't see her. Hearing this, Miles and my parents became even angrier.
Why do I need permission to see my own wife?
Explain what's going on. They were unbearably loud. Fed up, I first turned to my parents. Keep it down. Can't you remember being told to be quiet just a minute ago? Is there something wrong with your memory? Then to Miles, who was standing next to my parents with a red face, I said, You dare call yourself a husband while mistreating your wife? How ironic. Just then, Huey appeared, accompanied by 2 police officers.
All right, here we are. This is the husband and relatives of the victim I mentioned earlier.
As Huey pointed to the 3, their faces, which had been so red, suddenly tensed and turned pale.
What's going on? Why are the police here? Victim? You mean Carolyn?
Isn't this an exaggeration? She just felt a little sick. Stammering, Miles and my parents tried to argue back. Huey handed them his business card.
Ah, I should have mentioned earlier. I'm Leah's partner and a lawyer. From now on, I'll be representing Carolyn. Nice to meet you. Representing my wife? What do you mean, representing? Making a woman sit alone outdoors overnight in temperatures below 41 degrees Fahrenheit just to secure a cherry blossom viewing spot is far from normal by any standard.
But still, isn't it strange for a lawyer to get involved in something like this?
When a client asks for representation, it's natural for a lawyer to provide it. Besides, you guys canceled Carolyn's cell phone contract over a year ago and hardly give her any money. What if something had happened while she was out there? But nothing did happen, so... That's beside the point. Can't you imagine what would happen if someone went without food or water for nearly half a day? You're not kids anymore. But... Moreover, when you told her to secure the spot, you didn't even give her time to dress properly for the outdoors. You even locked her out immediately. How is this not malicious behavior?
Huey spoke smoothly, and the 2 police officers beside him nodded with stern expressions. I chimed in. When I met her, she was freezing and looked pale. That's why we brought her to this hospital in Selena's car right away. Actually, I was at the botanical garden 3 hours before meeting Miles and my parents because I had plans to meet Selena. I had texted Selena that I was meeting Miles and my parents under the guise of cherry blossom viewing. She suggested, why not take a stroll in the botanical garden to calm your nerves before that? I agreed as I was feeling a bit uneasy. Thanks to arriving much earlier, I was able to find Carolyn in poor condition. Panicked, I immediately called Selena, who was still at home. Her husband, a doctor, advised to bring her to the hospital as soon as possible and even came to pick us up as he was on his way to work. Thanks to that, Carolyn received prompt medical attention and her body temperature and color soon returned to normal. However, based on Selena's husband's diagnosis that she was both physically and mentally weak, she was transferred to the inpatient ward. In the meantime, after hearing Carolyn's story during the ride to the hospital and between exams, I consulted with Selena and contacted Huey, who promptly came over. Huey then acted as Carolyn's attorney, consulting with the police and contacting her family.
As far as I'm concerned, your actions against my client could be considered assault. Naturally, I plan to file a complaint in that regard.
Upon hearing this, Miles's face changed color.
Assault? That's a bit much. I didn't physically harm her or anything. Assault doesn't just refer to physical injuries. Past cases have defined it as adversely affecting a person's health. Adversely affecting health? She just felt a little sick. There's no need to make a big deal out of it. Whether it's a big deal or not is for the police and prosecutors to decide.
As Huey said this, the police officer standing behind us said,
let's take you somewhere to hear more about this,"
and led the three of them away. After getting an earful from the police, Miles and his parents returned home, only to find Carolyn's family waiting for them, looking furious. According to what Carolyn later told me, her brother had always thought of Miles as a bright and caring friend. When Miles started dating Carolyn, her brother was thrilled. But then Miles told him that Carolyn said,
"I've always hated my family. Now that I'm married, I finally cut ties. I told them to not contact me anymore."
After that, her brother was blocked on all forms of communication. He even visited their home, but was turned away, being told,
"She's crying and doesn't want to see you. Please leave."
On the other hand, Carolyn was told by Miles,
"Your brother never liked you. He begged me to take you off his hands. I only married you out of obligation, not love."
My parents and grandparents also kept telling her,
"You're a burden. Just be grateful we're putting up with you."
Clearly, they were trying to isolate Carolyn from her family to use her for their own convenience. What a despicable bunch. But all their schemes came to light because of this incident. Carolyn's family, who rushed over after hearing the news, took turns, staying with her until she recovered and was discharged from the hospital. Although the police ultimately let them off with a stern warning, in a small town like mine, social condemnation can be far worse than legal repercussions. When we took Carolyn to the hospital, the three of them showed up at the botanical garden, only to find it occupied by another group, which led to a heated argument. Word spread quickly about the incident, and rumors started flying. Miles and my dad felt so humiliated, they ended up quitting their jobs. As a result,
It seems that he repeatedly treated his young wife so badly that he even sent her to the hospital.
oh, I heard he went on a rampage that even the police were called.
Even the husband's parents got together and took his wife mentally.
Miles and Dad quit because they couldn't stand it anymore, as these rumors spread, with some exaggeration, not just in their workplace, but also in their neighborhood. Moreover, a big land development deal fell through, causing property values to plummet. Miles and his family, who had bought up neighboring lands, ended up in massive debt. Carolyn's family then demanded a divorce, compensation, and a division of assets, pushing everyone to the brink. My grandparents lost all their assets and had to move into a care facility after the shock of being kicked out of their home. Miles and my parents, now facing a hefty divorce settlement, begged Huey, who was representing Carolyn, for help and mediation. But Huey simply responded,
"You must be joking. If you try to contact Leah or me for money, we'll have to respond legally."
I had changed my number while my parents and Miles were being questioned by the police, and they didn't even know my current address or workplace, so there's no way they could contact me directly anymore. Now that I'm free from all the complications related to my family home, especially since my grandparents' inheritance is gone, I feel utterly liberated.